Thank you. There we go. That's what I was waiting for. So without further ado, we open this year's conference with our first session, Why Your Social Responsibility Story Matters. Help me welcome Andy Diorio, APR. Andy is two-time president of the GKC PRSA chapter and two-time winner of the Bill DeLay Award for Distinguished Service to the Greater Kansas City chapter. Andy is the Regional Public Relations Manager for Amazon, where he directs strategic external communications and public relations, focusing on Kansas and Missouri. A more than 15-year veteran in the industry, he has crafted communications for notable big brands such as Sprint, AMC Theaters, Lockton Companies, and Hallmark Cards, Inc., while also setting up a freelance communications practice, Diorio Communications. Take it away, Andy.
Thank you very much, Bridget. Appreciate that. And good morning to everyone. Thanks for getting up early, wherever you are here in the Midwest District on a Monday morning and joining this. Quick item to note, so that we have optimized sound for two videos we have in this presentation. I will not be able to see you or see the chat function during the presentation. So as we continue through our presentation this morning, if you have questions, you can still drop them in the chat or note them. Just please understand that we'll address those once I kind of get through the slides here and be happy to answer any questions you may have. Because on my end, I won't be able to see any of you. I'll just see my presentation, although you'll still see me and the slides. So just a quick note on that. And again, a great morning. So we're going to be sharing the screen here now. Okay, so these are the two, if you want to tweet along with the presentation, telling your social responsibility story, there is the PRSA Midwest handle, and then there is my handle as well. Very complicated first and last name on the docket there. So why is telling our responsibility story more important now than ever? And we're going to get into that today. And so every story has a beginning, of course. And so one of the beginnings we're going to talk about is what I've done at Hallmark and also what we're doing so far at Amazon, but also some tools, because I know not everyone works for big companies, that you can use for free and you can use right now to help your companies or clients regardless of size. So one of the beginnings starts way back in 1910 in David City, Nebraska. And the picture you see here on the screen is of J.C. Hall. That is the founder of Hallmark Cards. And both ideas we're going to talk about began with a product in a box to deliver to customers. And so J.C. Hall wanted to go out on his own and leave the family business in David City, Nebraska. So he matriculated south down to Kansas City, Missouri. And he was doing a great job of mailing postcards in the postcard business until a fateful fire in 1915 burned all of their Valentine's Day product literally to the ground. Now, he could have packed it up right then and there, but instead he said, no, I believe in this business and I believe in this community, so I want to forge ahead. And so the city supported him in that endeavor. And that sparked his responsibility journey of giving back to the city in which he called home again for now more than 110 years. Now, this gentleman might look a little bit more recognizable. Jeff Bezos started Amazon in 1994, and he too started his journey with a product in a box. Only this time, it was books. And why books? Because he saw that the internet was exploding in the early 1990s at more than 2,400%, an insane growth percentage that he couldn't believe. And so he wanted to give customers the most variety possible. And why books again? Because books is the most diverse product offering around. And which, of course, he went to CDs and then DVDs and then much else. And so really, Jeff's onus was motivated by Japan. And in Japan, specifically Sony's founder, Morita-san. Now, at the time when he founded Sony, Morita-san wanted Japan to be known for high quality, because at the time it was really just known for kind of cheap imitation products. And so Mr. Bezos appreciated Morita-san's vision of not just focusing on Sony the company, but focusing on a broader goal or broader mission of making the country known for quality. And so this inspired Mr. Bezos in focusing on Amazon, not just for its products, but to be the world's Earth's most customer-centric company and eventually best employer. So that is the origins of these two different stories that we're going to look at today. But today, again, as PR professionals, we often have to help build that business case because, numbers are the language of the C-suite. So today we're going to cover who exactly cares about this. All right, what is the consumer impact? And as communicators, why should we care? So again, we're going to build that business case to help justify why we need to bring this type of communication to the table. And then finally, how do we show that we care? Okay, you'll have tangible tactics to help you tell your CSR story. All right, so again, who cares? Why is this important? Why do we need to tell our CSR story? Or why do we need to tell the story of how our companies and clients are being responsible? Well, data, okay? 73% of millennials believe it's important for companies to stand for something beyond its products. That's about the same percentage for Gen Z or those less than 20. And by the way, millennials no longer are 25-year-olds. Millennials are now 40-year-olds. And so these two demographics are now your primary consumer. But make no mistake, price and quality are still number one. So you might be doing good in the marketplace, but if your products or services fail or are too expensive, then it won't matter. So hopefully by this point, you're now continuing to still listen to this presentation first thing in the morning with some data points that are relatable. But all consumers, 77% of us are motivated by companies that are willing to do more, okay? And this is across all demographics. Now, the C-suite, as we know, often their bosses are shareholders or board of directors, but investors agree because the more efforts that companies and clients take to improve the society, environment, causes they care about means more investment into the stockholders. And so they're happy because the company is having a good return on profits. But again, going back to who cares, really, our younger consumers have more of a discerning eye. And so it's the younger millennial Gen Z investors put more of an effort into what are you doing compared to the other demographics as well. Okay. But now, why should we care as PR professionals? How is this going to help us in our business? How is this going to help us maintain a seat at that table? Well, as we know, our owners might say, well, it's a cash flow. That's what it's all about, right? Because at the end of the day, if we're not making money, we are out of business. So why should we care? Well, we should care because actually trust in brands now is down, but expectations of us is up. And not only that, but 81% of last year's Trust Barometer respondents said that we need to trust you to do what's right. Now, this isn't 100 people surveyed or 1,000 people surveyed. This is more than 20,000 people surveyed. So this is a small soccer stadium size of people, if you will, that say we need to be able to trust you brands. And we're talking about trust. That's going to be an underlying theme here in our presentation. Now, companies that don't focus on sustainable products or initiatives, okay, they still see a nice 1% bump in sales. But those that do see 4 times the amount of increase in sales. So again, we have a higher expectation of us and our companies and our clients to produce and showcase ourselves beyond the products and services that we distribute as part of our core company. All right, and we know we see the scenes coming up for us here in a couple of weeks, especially at Amazon. Consumers are going to spend more if they see companies doing more, essentially. All right, now the buying considerations. All right, now for again last year's or 2019 Trust Barometer, I think too many brands use these issues purely as a marketing ploy. And we're going to see an example of this here in just a minute. So you have to be very genuine in that approach. And again, more than half think that we have a responsibility for at least one issue. Now, you don't have to tackle the world, but just pick one that perhaps doesn't directly impact your core business. Okay. Now, here's our first case study. This is Gillette, and they ran an ad a couple years ago that on the surface some love, but I'll tell you why this did not work out. So we're going to play this video right now.
Bullying.
The Me Too movement against sexual
Toxic
harassment.
masculinity.
Is this the best a man can get? Is it? We can't hide from it.
Sexual harassment is taking over.
It's been going on far too long. We can't laugh it off.
Who's the daddy?
What I actually think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
But something finally changed.
Allegations regarding sexual assault and sexual harassment.
But she says
And there will be no going back. Because we believe in the best in men.
Men need to hold other men accountable.
Smile, sweetie.
Come on.
To say the right thing. To act the right way.
Bro, not cool. Not cool.
Some already are. In ways big
Yo, men.
and small.
I am strong.
But some is not enough.
It's not how we treat each other, okay?
Okay.
Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow.
Okay. Now you might think, well, that's a pretty good ad. And Gillette had hoped that you thought so as well. Only the problem was it got a huge amount of pushback. It was not viewed favorably at all because it was a bold claim, is what it looked like. And not only that, but it was an $8 million bold claim. That's the amount of money that Gillette put into that campaign. Now you may be thinking, well, what was wrong with that ad? Well, its detractors said a couple of things. First, Gillette was accused of deleting negative comments on social about the ad. Big no-no in transparency. And second, this was the same company that just 6 years earlier in 2013 had a campaign where they basically had men and women make out with men who hadn't shaved and then men who had shaved. So this is the same company that basically used women as the object of affection and reward, and then suddenly fast forward and said, oh, don't do that. So while some would say that's an evolution of their thinking, true, but others in a very finite amount of period might say, well, you're kind of sending us mixed messages there. And finally, core consumers said, what do razors have to do with this? You know, I just wanted you to help me shave my face or shave my legs. And you notice there wasn't any products in that ad whatsoever. So I think that was a disconnect for some consumers. So as we saw in some of the data beforehand, yes, we want companies to stand for societal issue beyond its core products and services, but some consumers had a disconnect because they did not see how making the best men can be tied into shaving their face, essentially. So again, very measured in how brands can go forward with that. Now the buying considerations, all right? We just mentioned, you know, I want Gillette to help me shave my face or my legs because it's going to impact the dollars I spend with the company. Okay. Now, more than half consumers said, I'm just going to stop using a company's products. So, right, I'm going to switch to Bic razors instead, or to Harry's, or to somebody else. And almost half said investors decided not to invest in the company. Okay. So now you're losing capital to keep the business going and growing. And in fact, some want it all out. Okay. Not only am I not going to invest, I'm selling out. Okay. I want nothing more to do with you, which is a concerning factor. All right. But there is hope. Forgiveness awaits. More than 3/4 said we are willing to forgive for what they think is bad behavior. Okay. However, a quarter said zero tolerance. All right. There is a zero strike policy out there. So it really just depends on how bold you want to be and how willing you're ready to make that gamble, essentially, knowing that a quarter of respondents and investors are either going to pull out completely or completely shift in buying products. So there are some guardrails to kind of look at in measuring your risk versus reward. Okay. Now, 13% of us strongly trust a brand after seeing it one time. And as PR professionals, perhaps we know that one time is not going to cut it. That now we have multiple mediums at our disposal where it's paid, organic, owned, shared to further amplify that message. And here's another data point on why that's important. Because 87% increase a strong trust in a brand if they see it 6 times. Okay. So when our bosses say, well, we're tweeting about it, we're posting a blog about it, we send a news release about it, we're doing an on-site story about it, do we really need to do all this? The answer is yes, because there is a percentage point that tells us it greatly increases the trust that we have of our consumers in our brand or in our client's brand. That's the important why. Not that you have to hit them over the head with it, but you got to hit them over the head with it. Okay. All right. Now, further into the trust. And we saw here this 3-year trend, what we call brand democracy. Okay. The buying considerations. The more that I expect them to solve some of the societal problems, because again, their wallet is their vote. And so we see kind of this increase, especially from 17 to 18, of what we call belief-driven buyers. Do I believe in your company? Do I believe in your products? And most importantly, do I believe that you're trying to do something better than just pad your bottom line. And that's been a consistent trend over the last couple of years. Okay, now we turn our focus to our employees. Here are some of Amazon's wonderful employees at one of our fulfillment centers. Okay, because our employees, as we know, are our best brand ambassadors. So how do we get them on board with this? Well, here is what we call the Trusted Employers Lead on Change. Okay, so these essentially are the top 5 topics that are great in building employee and employer trust. Okay, trust between the employer and the employee. And we see that societal impact ranks toward the top. Okay, how are our companies or our clients helping to move that societal journey forward? Okay, below the values that you see posted on the walls or the future vision or our basic operations. Okay, so very important from an employee branding perspective. All right, now here's a further metric that really shows why this is important. Okay, because the more you have trust between your employees and the employer, you see a phenomenal trust advantage. Okay, the greater they'll be advocates for you, the more they'll be loyal to the company, the higher they'll be engaged, and the increasingly more committed they'll be to your company when that trust agreement has been reached. If they don't trust you, you can see the vast differential of them basically bailing out on the company essentially. So this is why it's important from a numerical standpoint to have that partnership in play. Okay, now the expectations. More than 3/4 said, we expect an opportunity to shape the future of society, being an employee of the company or of the agency. And likewise, we, the employees, want to be included in the planning, of which they say, you are absolutely right. We better be. Okay, you hired us on, you're promising benefits, but we want to make sure that this company stands for more than just what I'm clocking in, clocking out every day to do. Okay. All right, so what is this? What does this look like? Well, this is from Edelman, this new employer-employee contract. Okay, so starts with we're leading change. Okay, we're standing for more than our core products and services, but we're also doing that not from an executive suite on high, but from empowering our employees throughout all levels of the organization. Okay, and again, the question, well, where do I start? How do we conquer the world? Start in your backyard, and we'll talk about that here in the case study that we'll move into next. Start locally. Start in your hometown, your headquarters area, and branch out from there. And of course, as we know as PR pros, we can't move anything forward if we don't have that support from the top. So the CEO leadership has to be on board. And that's why we're going through this presentation to share some of this data and numbers and financials to show them how this boosts the bottom line by also helping to empower employees. So this is kind of our contract on how we can build that trust, bring our employees on board as well. All right, now new data in this year. All right, we talk about that trust, which is so key and so important. Businesses are now on the lead position on the medal stand for being the trusted institution. Okay, government has deferred basically, as we've seen the political divide over the last couple of years. So it's businesses now that are seen as the most trusted institution. And this is from this year's Edelman Trust Barometer. Okay, not just businesses now, but your business and your local employer. So now employees are saying, not only do I trust businesses to have the most reliable information, but it's my company that I trust and my leadership that I trust to be leading the charge on the change, if you will. And so I'll give you a minute to look at some of these other sources. Again, government shifted number 2, media number 3, and on down the road. So even though you see major corporations in the 4th position here, that's other people. Okay, yes, it's other businesses, but it's other businesses that either industries I don't know, other companies maybe I don't trust. What I trust the most is my employer. Okay, that's why this employee-employer contract is so important. All right, again, we talked about that last part of the employee-employer contract, the CEO leadership. Okay, so again, not only is it my employer, part of the business that I trust, but more than 2/3 say CEOs should step in when government's not doing the job they don't think. They should take the lead, and they should hold themselves accountable. All right, that honest transparency, and we're not doing the job. And frankly, this is something that even being on board with Amazon here for a matter of months, I've seen Amazon do, where they're much more transparent now and saying, we have work to do. Okay, we are not perfect. We are not where we want to be, but we're going to continually strive to get better. And we know that, and we want to do that. So that's a key component in being that transparent employer of choice. Okay, we'll get to the case study in just a minute, but these are also important data points. So obviously the world has changed greatly since 2019, okay? Little thing we all know as COVID. And so now when we talk about where do we start, and we looked at starting locally, okay? Start in our backyard, start in our core demographic area for our client, for our company. But here are the issues now that are important to our consumers. And this shows a shift from 19 to 2020. And top of the list, fair wages to employees. Okay, many of us have been negatively impacted with the pandemic, companies finding different ways to go about their business. Number two, equal pay. All right, treat us fairly, pay us fairly. Okay, it doesn't seem like too complex of an ask, but for many businesses it has been, as many of you are well aware. And what's in the dotted boxes here are the environment. Now, I saw in 2019, the environment and climate change was top of the list. And why these are highlighted here is it shows that that's kind of shifted. Our concern now is, yes, the environment is still important because it's obviously in the top 5 here, but employee treatment has topped the list now at number 1 and number 2. And in case you're wondering what the difference is between the solid bars and the lighter bars and the smaller percentages, the solid bars are very much agree, and the lighter bars are somewhat agree. So still you're talking nearly the entire population of the survey respondents said these are very, very important issues for us. Okay, so this is the consumer perspective, but how does it align with our executives? Because again, a lot of times, as we know as PR pros, it's our job not to convince, but to help them comprehend the importance of these initiatives. And so here's the alignment between what consumers are thinking of as the top issues as of last year in the midst of the pandemic and what our executives are thinking. So the executives, again, not as higher percentages, but I think what's comforting in these comparison is that at least for the top 5, executives have prioritized them the same as the consumers. So that helps us as PR pros having a starting point or a common denominator of issues, so that as we try to work with them and provide counsel on why these issues are important, at least this shows that they get it and they understand what those issues are for us. Okay. All right. Now, we've gone through the data points. We've built the business case, hopefully, for our executives on why this is important. All right. Not just us saying it. Now we have quantitative data to go with our qualitative feedback. So how do we show that you care or that we care? And so for this, we're going to look at an example, my time at Hallmark, in which I helped create the company's first CSR report for the company. All right, again, we're going back to our friend J.C. Hall. Okay, now J.C. Hall and Jeff Bezos, they're founding the companies were separated by 84 years and 1,800 miles. But again, some similarities exist. So again, J.C. Hall's business burnt to the ground on Valentine's Day would break anyone's heart, of course, but he literally rose from the ashes and decided to give back to the Kansas City community that supported him and his business as they continue to grow. So from a historical perspective, way back in, let's say, 2016, 5 years ago, this is a listing of all of Hallmark's different lines of businesses. Okay. Now, as we're trying to communicate who Hallmark is and what we want Hallmark to be, it's a little difficult to do that when you have nearly 25 different lines of business for the consumers. So what are we doing? We want to start locally. How do we summarize it and make it easier for our consumers to understand who we are? And so that strategy involves adopting what we call the portfolio strategy. So we said, instead of all those 25 different lines of business, we are focused on these 6 pods, basically, these 6 portfolios. And what happened was those different 25 lines of business all lined up into one of these 6 parts of the business. Okay, so now we have something more easily attainable for the consumer to understand who Hallmark was. Okay, now what do we want to stand for? What's our North Star? And so we land on these 4 core North Stars. We have world-class creative talent. What many people didn't know, it's the second largest creative force behind Disney. Okay, corporate social responsibility. So pretty amazing that we were able to land that as one of our core 4, if you will. Growth through innovation, which means we're creating new projects. We're just not buying up a lot of companies. And emotional connections. Okay, what is it that's at the heart of the business? Well, Hallmark creates products and entities that help you connect with one person to another. Okay, but how are we going to accomplish this? All right, again, we're going to tell our story to the local media. Again, let's rebuild in our backyard. candidly, where this came from was Hallmark went through a restructuring in 2015, unlike it had ever experienced in the company's history, and was very reactive to media. So when I joined the company, I said, well, one of the first things we have to do is rebuild and create those relationships. Let them know that there is more of a transparent and open door into the company versus only being there when we want them to be there. Okay, so again, let's get our local house in order and let's rebuild kind of our neighborhood before we look at expanding beyond. But that doesn't mean outruling any national opportunities. So let's just be measured on how we kind of tell those stories. Okay, external constituents. So these can be in your local community, political ties, and then building those stronger partnerships across those 6 parts of the business portfolio, because we're going to need them. And I'll tell you that here in a minute, on helping us tell those stories across the business, whether in the UK, Hong Kong, or the US. And again, the best part of your company or agency is its culture. That's what attracts your employees. That's what helps build that employer and employee trust contract that we looked at earlier. Okay. Now, prior to 2016, Hallmark was kind of telling its story a little bit. Okay. What you see here is a front cover copy of its diversity and inclusion report. You notice I didn't say diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay, so that's how far we've already come just in the last 5 years. And they had put this report out for about the last 6 years, but it was only focused on what was going on in its headquarters and the Kansas City market. That's it. Okay. And then in 2015, it put out its community impact report. But again, only what we're doing specifically in the Kansas City market. And so we took a step back. We said, okay, we are not having the breadth and the reach that we need to help tell this story. So let's take our D&I information and let's take our community impact information, but let's add sustainability, bring it together for one report. And let's tell these stories not in Kansas City only, but across the world of all of our operations to give everyone an understanding of the true breadth we have of how we're giving back and caring for the communities in which we serve. Oh, and by the way, Andy, we want you to lead this project and you have about 3.5 months to do it. So as you can imagine, there was some internal screaming going on board. I've been with the company for about 5 months, but I said, I will take the challenge of helping to tell this new global story for the company. All right, so after I got done screaming, again, we boiled it down like the true PR pros that we are. All right, what are the key tenets of telling the story? Okay, so if we go back to those prior 4, we knew company culture was 1. Okay, so in this new CSR report, let's focus on the workplace. Okay, in this section, we're going to do descriptions of each line of the business, of the demographics of our workforce, of a description of what makes us tick and what's fun about the company. Okay, community. Again, how do we give back in the communities in which we serve? Through product donations, through financial contributions, through causes that we contribute in across the world. Sustainability, how are we mindful about how our products are produced? And not only that, but the supply chain aspect of it. So in working with our partners across the other side of the world, how are we keeping them accountable for helping to ensure that safe and sustainable products reach our consumers? And diversity and inclusion. Again, equity hadn't played into that yet, but that was part of this onus as well. All right, how are we trying to be transparent in our efforts to have my more diverse workforce, but also be responsive to a more diverse consumer force as well. Okay. Now, why is this GIF on here? Well, because with anything new, as you can imagine, change is hard. Okay. You're moving cheese, you're changing people's behavior, you're changing the way they do the work. Not all of them take kindly to it. Okay. So, candidly, some partners within those lines of business basically said, no, and how dare you? How dare you try to come in and tell my story? You do not work in the community impact space every day. You do not work in the diversity and inclusion space every day. So not only do you not know my business, but I cannot trust you to tell the story because you are not in this every day. You don't talk to the people that we do. You don't know our operations. Okay, so what can you do when you have resistance from your own internal teams? Okay. And so what I developed was called a RICE strategy. All right. Now, it's not this kind of RICE, and it's not that kind of RICE. Instead, it's an acronym for RICE. And so this is how we kind of brought our internal partners along in helping to tell the story because we need them. Okay. The first R is reassurance. Okay. reassure them that I am not, as a project leader, taking anything over from you. I'm not trying to steal it away from you. Okay. Number two, inclusion. We need you and we want you to be part of this process. We can't tell the story without you. Okay. Have a literal seat at the table of all these meetings. Constant updates. Bring them along with the weekly update. Okay. Here's where things stand. Here's what we're thinking. What is your take on fill in the blank? Okay. So they feel like a truly inclusive process, that their expertise is needed to help make this broader vision come to life. All right. And number four, empower as advocates. Okay. Look, John, Jane, you are the experts. Okay. We can't build these stories unless you bring these stories to us. Okay. So we need you to be the charge and talk to your constituents and find out what's going well with them. What are the stories that you and your volunteers know the best that we can help amplify on a broader scale? Give them some ownership in that process. And these four tactics worked well in kind of breaking down those barriers. And in fact, one person that we kind of just was oil and water against, I said, I'm just going to go to this person's office. And I had other colleagues that would freak out, like, oh my gosh, you're going to the office, they're a director, what are you going to do? I said, I'm laying down the arms, I'm walking to the lion's den to show I have nothing to hide and kind of meet them on their own turf where they're most comfortable. And it turned out that this individual thought that as a newer employee, I had just come in and said, I'm doing this, I'm taking over. And so since then, he had resistance because he thought that it was just something I had proposed, that I was trying to lessen his impact on the company. And that could be further from the truth. In fact, our senior vice president had said, we want to have this vision, and I just happened to be tapped to lead it. So once we had that common understanding, it was night and day difference from his participation and his engagement. So don't be afraid to have those hard conversations, because they're hard, but if you lead them and you're proactive about it, then you're the one that's helping to tear down those walls. Okay. So the story mining, not like this mining, and we wish it was easy as just collecting stories walking down the hallway, but that's why we need to empower them as advocates, because we need them to help give us those stories so we can fill in that CSR report. Okay. So as you're trying to collect those stories to build your overall voice, identify those story spotters. Okay. Maybe it is those key contacts in your different areas of the business or for your client, or it's the volunteers who are on the front lines helping to do those activities. Educate them on the criteria. A learning that I had was, if I said, we need some pictures from that event, what I would get back was a lot of dark shots, bad lighting, a lot of back of heads for an event. I think we've all seen those. Maybe we've taken some of those pictures, but instead we want smiling faces. We need good lighting. We need some engaging stuff. We don't need the panoramic shot of 1,000 employees. We need the close-up shot of maybe 3 or 4 employees zooming in on the details. Okay. We as the communicators need to do a better job of telling them exactly what are we looking for, and magnify the visuals. Okay. A lot of times, maybe we didn't have an event. Maybe there's nothing to really show, but we have data. So how can we use that data to be the graphic in the story, whether it's an infographic or blowing up just a single percentage to still be a visual element to help that story pop. Okay. And finally, befriend your creative partners, whether it's in-house or an external firm. Half the story is visual. Okay. They can't create anything if we don't have the content, but again, it's how it looks and how it appears that really helps that story resonate. And so we make sure that our creative friends and partners are along for the ride with us, because they can help it truly come to life in whatever we do. And we'll see a couple of tactics on how that visual representation comes across. All right, so the first year, this is what the report looked like. Caring in action, that was the name of it, because the slogan was, when you care enough to send the very best, okay? And then we evolved to, when you care enough, you can change the world. All right, so believe it or not, we toggled over a month on what the name of this report was going to be, all right, with caring in the title somehow. But then we got done with that report. We came to the next year. Okay, well, we need to care again. But how do we say care again? And then we thought, you know what, 5 years down the road, we're going to run out of caring titles, basically. So what we decided to do is that our socially responsive report is simply going to be called Caring in Action. And so that's what we did the following year. We kept the theme, the colors the same, but we had that consistent message across the board that we continued with. Okay. So in the first year, we'll go back here, it was all it takes is a single spark to kind of light a flame of improvement. Okay. The second year, all right, again, all it takes is maybe a seed to spread and create the greater good. And finally, you can kind of see where we're going here. All it takes is a drop to create a larger ripple effect of positiveness in the world. Okay. Again, showing how that trend continues. All right. Now everybody gets this, right? So as a private company, often employees want to know what it cannot say. But now what this responsive report did, and again, it's 85 pages of fun, is that we made this available to everybody, to all employees. Everyone gets a report, which is wonderful. But how in the world are we supposed to calculate and figure out how to distribute this thing? Where do we even start? Okay. Well, we started again, local, inside the company. Okay. So what you see here are boards in the main thoroughfare inside Hallmark's headquarters where all employees, guests, constituents walk through. And why is it here? Because it's on the way to the lunchroom. All right. Everyone's got to eat at some point. So this is a way for us to magnify the visuals, again, partnering with creative, and showcasing this in our building. Now, I understand not everyone has a huge headquarters building, but either they have a front lobby or they have a key message board that they can post some of these visuals from the report. Again, going back to what we talked about earlier, they need to see this message 6 times to have over 80% basically comprehension rate. So don't be afraid to sprinkle parts of the report all where your employees are going to see it. Okay. Now, we know websites are important, especially YouTube and Facebook. And not only that, but where they access them on the mobile device. So make sure your websites are mobile responsive. So we put all this content under a citizenship tab on Hallmark. There's the URL right there. You can go to it today to see what they've done since then. And we help tell the stories of how we partnered with UNICEF for 10 years to help feed starving children, or how one of the supply chain vendors in Vietnam was the first to have the largest solar panel installed in the country. Okay. Again, how are we doing good? And the distribution impact. Well, it's always great when your external constituents are reciting back to you your key messages. In this case, this is the director of our local huge museum here in Kansas City. And what was music to our ears was that line where he says, portfolio of businesses. Yes. Okay. No longer is this 25 convoluted lines of business, but the portfolio of these 6 lines of business is getting across and sinking into our messages. Okay. That's music to our ears as PR pros. The key message. We love it. And employer of choice. This is a group of summer interns. And we did have interns tell us, look, Hallmark, I'll be honest with you, I had other offers. I could have gone elsewhere and anywhere, but I didn't, because I did see how Hallmark was contributing to causes greater than itself in the community space, in the diversity and inclusion space, and in the sustainability space. So now these efforts and these stories that are getting out there is helping us win and retain talent. But now comes the biggie for us. So again, PR pros. One of our challenges obviously is finding kind of data and how do we connect what we do to the core tenets of our business, okay? And so identifying this in any company perhaps, or with your clients, you know that you have certain, whether it's VPs of sales, business development, et cetera, maybe the CEO is doing it on his or her own right. How do we connect what we're doing on winning and retaining our business, just like we did with our talent? And what I discovered was we have these stories that can align to what other companies and customers are doing. So this CSR report is almost a year-round project. But once we released the prior report, I went to all of our VPs of business development. I said, okay, John or Jane, you help the Walmart account, you help the Walgreens account or Dollar Tree. What are those issues or causes that are important to them? You know, it could range from military veteran support to childhood education to feeding the hungry in communities. Okay, great, got it. And so then throughout the year, as we were mining those stories and engaging our internal partners and their constituents and their subject matter experts on what activities they were doing, we could highlight those stories and make sure to include those in our CSR report. And then when the next report comes out, I reach back out to my internal partners and said, hey, John and Jane, you told me that Walmart, it was important that they did this, this, and this. Here are concrete examples of how Hallmark was doing that, to then help them go back to their customer and say, here's how not only can we fulfill your product needs as a vendor, but that we're like-minded in the causes that we share and we support. helping to further strengthen that relationship. So again, that's a way that as PR pros, again, another way we can show how we're tying the business needs and importance to the stories that we share from a communication standpoint, okay? All right, another tool to use called 3BL Media. In case you haven't heard of 3BL Media, I hadn't either prior to 4 years ago. But what 3BL Media does, think of them as kind of a business wire for CSR, if you will. And what they do is they help, if you have a report or even a semblance of stories, cut that report up, position it differently. It could be a news release, it could be a social media post, and they distribute it to their network of CSR-minded publications and outlets, okay? Helping you kind of find that almost like a trade publication distribution for CSR efforts, okay? So we partner with 3BL Media, and in the first 5 months of doing so, which is in the latter 5 months of a calendar year, we saw positive results, okay? So the average impressions that we had of our content was 41% above the benchmark. Great. The average clicks on our content, click, let me read more, again, way above the benchmarks, which is great. And so we might be thinking, okay, well, first 5 months, so far so good, how are we going to do? But let's look at the first 5 months of the next year, all right? Is this trend continuing? And we saw that, yes, in fact, both 5-month periods, it was trending. And so this was a good benchmark to know that the stories that we're putting in these reports are resonating with the broader CSR community. And for us, those were the topics of community involvement and engagement and diversity and inclusion. And any content we put out about our executives being engaged also spiked through the roof, okay? So those are good buckets for you to help, again, sharpen your story mining focus on what is important to include in those reports and what resonates with an external audience. And again, you've got numbers to share. You have quantitative data to show our executives to further help build the business case as PR pros, okay? Again, repurposing, all right? We pulled out information and made social media graphics out of it, okay? Look like this, put on social. We use this as inspiration for the banners inside the office. Again, further elevating, further helping them see that message 6 times on what the impact is. All right, second video, anyone can have an event, but don't think an event is not a shareable opportunity. So we created this highlight video of what you can do if you're doing a donation. And as we know in PR pros, kids and animals are great for TV. All right, so here's an example of what we did to celebrate an invitation and a donation for a local kids organization.
Began its journey as a traveling exhibit in 1969 before moving into its permanent home here in Crown Center in 1975. We've always believed in the importance of giving back to a community that has always been so very supportive of this company. And we feel so fortunate to be able to offer the city's kids such a unique and free opportunity for self-expression. Like a toy kaleidoscope, which provides an array of changing shapes and images, the Experience Kaleidoscope provides kids a different discovery each and every time they visit. In honor of Kaleidoscope's 50th anniversary, we are proud to support the continuation of the arts programming at Operation Breakthrough by making a special $50,000 contribution.
Each time we were able to expand and take more children, Hallmark was there right next to us. And for this, we are truly grateful for this gift and the ongoing support of Hallmark and the Post. Thank you so much.
Anyone who visits Kaleidoscope for the remainder of this year will have an opportunity to help foster that love of creativity by making their own donation. So in honor of our 50th anniversary, we will accept 50-cent donations from each visitor. The grand total of those contributions will be presented to Operation Breakthrough. Mayor James and the City Council have proclaimed today, July 1st, 2019, to be Kaleidoscope Day.
Kaleidoscope is something that spurs the imagination. And how many people will never know how many kids went through there and something hit, something touched them.
All right, so 50th anniversary. What you don't see there is that it was about 95 degrees on that morning at 10 a.m. But that doesn't matter, because what you saw were great, happy kids, a donation to a wonderful cause going forward. So again, don't think that any event or anything you do is minor. If you have a great, simple video package, again, you can spread this and again, keep that message resonating throughout all of your channels. Okay, now we shift to Amazon, where I'm at right now. And again, we go back to Jeff Bezos, who, if you look into one of his early offices here, you think, well, how could that inspire anyone, right? If you don't know, the desk he is working on is actually a desk he built himself. The top is a door he bought at Home Depot, and the legs are 2x4s that he fashioned on there as well. Because cost, you want to keep minimal in the new business. Didn't want to expend it on frivolous things. You want to focus on the customer. And fun fact, these desks are still built and used at Amazon offices and facilities today. I've seen it, I've used it. And so again, focusing on the customer and going back to his motivation, which was, let's not see how great we can make Amazon. Let's try to be Earth's most customer-centric company. And by that, he means, how can I help build a business that benefits our consumers and focused on their needs and then work backwards versus, okay, what are our competitors doing and how do we counter that? Okay, so kind of block out the noise, focus on how can we make our customers best meet their needs. Okay, and so sometimes the biggest initiatives happen with the smallest conversations. So this is Jeff talking with Christina Figueres, who's a former executive secretary of the UN Framework Committee. And what Christiana helped do was create the Paris Agreement. Okay, we've all heard about, and what the Paris Agreement is, it's basically how can we get to net zero carbon as a business by 2050, 50. And so through this conversation, again, how can Amazon be a leader in the space? We said, you know what, we're going to combine with Christiana's expertise, create the Climate Pledge. And what the Climate Pledge is saying is that as Amazon, we encourage other companies to join us in trying to beat that goal by 10 years. Okay, so by 2040, how do we get to net zero carbon across our businesses? So going back to inspiration of how do we think of something bigger than ourselves and try to encourage and bring people along with us. Okay, and basically what that means is, you know, how do we celebrate the wind farms that we might do across the country to have renewable energy essentially? And now we're doing it 100% by 2025. So we're already hitting that part of it early. And then how do we invest in the products that we used? So we looked at Gillette a while ago. All right, be the best men can be, but razors weren't involved whatsoever. And then that was a disconnect for a lot of consumers. But Amazon, you've seen them. You probably have one coming to your house today, for all we know. But it's our delivery vans from our delivery service partner agreement. All right, we just placed the biggest order for fully electric vehicles to help, again, reduce the carbon emissions. So again, tying into the products or the services we offer so that it's easier for the consumer to see that connection. Okay, and then continuing to reinvent ourselves. All right, how do we have better packaging, more sustainable packaging? Online ordering obviously reduces the carbon footprint a lot, but once you make that order, it still has to get to your front door. So how can we better think about how that actually arrives to your front door once you've made that order? Okay, and then thinking broadly with the resources that we have. All right, the Now Climate Fund, which is helping to restore and sustain forest and greening all around the world, partnering with the Nature Conservatory. Now, how do we share it? Okay, this is the URL you can go to today. This is all about the Climate Pledge, some of the same graphics you've seen. So as your company and clients have websites, don't be afraid to be transparent about your efforts. The expectation is not that you're perfect, but that you're proactive. Okay, you're proactive in your efforts, in your clients' efforts of doing something for the greater good and doing something that is good. Okay, not only on this website, you can also find different aspects of progress for a company. Okay, we already talked about the Climate Pledge. How is it helping the racial justice and equality efforts? And then hearkening back to the products and services, not that we're pushing it out, that we're mindful about those. All right, what are sustainable devices that we offer to help contribute toward the greater cause? Okay, and this is on our website right now. We talked about what are those top 2 concerns right now of consumers from this year's Trust Barometer, how you're treating people and how you're paying people. Okay, this is on the, you don't have to, this is not 8 clicks in to navigate to the website. This is on the home page of this URL. Okay, Great. We're paying women 100 cents per dollar for every man. That's great. But as I mentioned, we are transparent in what we're not reaching that we want to do. Okay. Minorities are 99.2% for every dollar that white employees did. Not good enough. Okay. And we know that. But this, here it is, literally plain as day for you to see how transparent that Amazon is being in trying to get to that 100%. Okay. Close is not good enough. So that's, again, it's okay to be transparent and that you're trying, even if you're not quite there yet. Okay. And of course, they also have their CSR report, which I won't bore you with the details, but that, of course, is available as well, accessible for anybody, employees or consumers. All right. Now, the sharing of it. Okay. Shared across your channels. We talked about that 6x, that 6x effect. Okay. So whether it's on the main Amazon News Twitter feed, in which we talk about an employee who not only does a great job at work, but he's also a farmer. He's got a multi-generational farm in Mississippi that he still tends to. So he's got sustainability in his mind all the time, okay? Or wind farms across the pond through our European Union contacts. Or your CEO. So in this case, Andy Jassy. So many of you may not know, or maybe you do, Jeff Bezos relinquished the CEO title in July, and longtime employee Andy Jassy, who was leading the AWS efforts, took over as CEO. So again, having that CEO buy-in, as we saw earlier, more than 2/3 of respondents expect to see that from their employer, is huge. And then again, anytime you can elicit third-party endorsements, so in this case, John Kerry, showcase these events that we have, again, on Amazon News, that will help further engagement and your message on how you're sharing that. Okay, now, all that being said, I say this, I understand not everyone works for a Hallmark or an Amazon, okay? You may not have billions of dollars of resources or millions or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. So if you have a smaller business or you have smaller clients in smaller markets, and they're like, well we're not going to partner with, the Nature Conservancy and have $100 billion campaign for this, or we're not going to be able to do all of that. So here are some free and smaller tools ready to use today that you can help share your message and help tell your story, okay? The first, if you're not aware, is called Canva. It is graphic designer made simple, okay? There are plenty of free versions for you to use to craft social media content, to fit on Facebook, to fit on Instagram, to fit on LinkedIn, and Twitter, okay? Basically, they give you free templates. All you have to have is the image. And then you can drop the image into the template, work around your graphical, if it's 55% of something and you're helping to cut down paper, 55% in a tree, that's all you need. Yes, there's a paid version that gives you more options, but if you're tight on a budget, there are plenty of free options, which I have used myself, that you can use. So canva.com is your free kind of graphic design template, especially to start on social media, okay? All right, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and this is the URL right here. Now, these are goals put out for all companies to try to aspire to help tie their local efforts to a broader cause. So if you are in Madison, Wisconsin, and you're saying, well, we do this food kitchen project every year, we help feed 500 homeless families in the area, that's great. You can tie that to the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 2 of zero hunger. Now, when you go to this URL, you will see the full blown out description of what falls into all of these 17 different goals. Don't let that intimidate you. What they have there are what I call star points, things to aspire to. All right. How are you progressing toward eventually that goal? You do not need to be there yet. You do not have to be close to it yet. But as long as you have efforts that can fall into each of these 17 buckets, then you can attribute it to these goals. And I can preach firsthand this because we had calls earlier during my time with Hallmark with the UN team that developed these goals. And they said, you can do exactly that. Okay, you do not need to hit the mark on if you have a wellness program and you're encouraging employees or customers to get their steps in, boom, goal number 3, you're working toward that or you're tied into that goal. You don't have to hit what the UN has described as an overarching goal. Just be able to show that you have an effort or an event or a cause that funnels up into that goal, okay? So again, it's how you're contributing locally, but having a bigger global effect and vision of your mission, okay? Completely free tactic for you to use. Next up, The CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion. Again, URL is on your page. This was created by the CEO of PwC, formerly PricewaterhouseCoopers. And this has 4 tenets under the CEO Action for D&I. And basically what this is a pledge for all CEOs of businesses to put their name down and said, yes, our company is committed to aspiring to these 4 things, okay? Again, you have access to resources. It is free to sign up. I will admit some companies don't like putting their name on the dotted line because they feel like it's beholding them to doing exactly these 4 things and meeting a certain criteria. Similar to the UN Sustainable Goals, this is not a mandate or a scorecard that you will be checked on in a certain period of time. Just show that you are taking efforts to get to these 4 things, or you have initiatives to get to these 4 things. Or if you don't, that you have plans or aspirations to start, okay? These can be big companies, these can be small companies, but it's a way, again, tying back to that CEO buy-in, that the CEO can put his or her name on the dotted line and say, yes, company ABC is committed to these 4 things, okay? And finally, this is more for the community involvement sector of it, pointsoflight.org. Again, this URL is right here. It focuses on the 4 things you see on your screen. And this is an application process of your community involvement and impact initiatives. And what it does, it basically highlights the top 50 organizations in different fields. If you're not awarded in the top 50, that's okay, because you get 2 things. Number 1, Points of Light is not going to broadcast who didn't make the list. Okay, so you're not penalized for applying. Number 2, they provide you kind of a scorecard of, okay, you didn't make it this year, but here are some areas that you can enhance or improve on to try to make the list next year. So if you're just beginning, or if you're trying to figure out what your community involvement area is, and if you apply, at least you kind of get some feedback on where you need to enhance or bolster those efforts. So I think that can be very valuable as well. Again, all these are free to look into. All right, now we're talking about stories, and here's my theory on telling a story. Okay, it's 3 tenets, and it's these 3 things. No one's going to know your story unless you tell it to them. Okay, perhaps obvious, but again, don't be afraid to start. No one's going to care about your story unless they can relate to it. Okay, so just like the Gillette example, I'm not seeing the razors I use in your ad. I'm not relating to the message you're trying to make. Okay, so that was that disconnect. Make sure they can relate to your message. And finally, no one's going to remember your story unless it makes an impact. Okay, we all donate things, money, products, whatever it may be. But instead of saying we donated $5,000 to the local food bank, well, what did that $5,000 do? How many starving children did it help? Or how many homeless families did you assist? How many backpacks of school supplies were you able to cull together for the local elementary school? Okay, that's the impact to show and to highlight. Okay, so you got to tell it to them. Broadcast your story. Tie in how it relates to your products or for their consumer experience with your client or your company. And what is the impact? Whether it's that local that we want to start building something, or on a broader scale of how you're reaching consumers across perhaps your core demographic. Okay. So these are my handles. Feel free to connect with me if you want. I'm going to now stop sharing my screen so I can see all of your lovely faces in the chat function. So I'm going to do that now. Thanks so much for your time this morning. And now I can see all of you. And so at this point, Bridget, if you wouldn't mind, be nice, be gentle. I will try to take all of your questions here in the time we have left.
Thanks, Andy. It was awesome. So we don't have any questions yet in the chat, but okay. I'm sure that we will. But we have some good comments and conversation.
Excellent. Excellent. I guess the question I would have is, are any of you, do you have clients or even your own companies that are struggling with how do we begin or what should we start with as far as telling your stories in that regard? Lynn, go ahead.
So this isn't necessarily for a paying client, but I'm a Rotarian, and I am the public image chair for our district, which is 2,500 Rotarians, 59 clubs. And I really related to you when you had to gain the trust of, because it's kind of like we're from the government and we're here to help you. We're here from the district and let us help you. And not only that, I'm new to the area. So I very much appreciate using them, applying them to tell the stories of all of our clubs and what they're doing in their communities, because Rotarians suck at telling their story. I mean, yeah, they want everything to start with Rotary as opposed to putting a face on who they help. So yeah, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, and like you said, Len, being new, you yourself are trying to build that trust to start with. So, I'm here to help you. I know I'm new, and very similar to when I started at Hallmark, I was with the company for less than 5 months. So I joined in November, and this project was kicked off in February. But I raised my hand and said, I'll take that challenge on. What I would do differently in that situation is have those one-off conversations with those majority stakeholders. So whether it's for the person, in my case, diversity, inclusion, community impact, sustainability, and kind of further explain to him and her that RICE strategy. Okay, I'm not taking over. I'm here to just help amplify the great work that you are already doing. And this is going to help enhance your job or your role or your organization with Rotary. It's going to further broadcast our overall message to a bigger audience. Not that so it just we can get credit for what we're doing, but so that we can enhance the education of what we're doing and the impact that we're having. So again, if you want to learn from my mistake, have those tough or those frank conversations early before you kind of start that ball rolling.
Yes.
And Andy, I think we have a comment and a question from Jill. Great seeing you again. Wonderful presentation. You have had an extensive career in PR. What advice do you have for students just beginning their career journey?
Certainly. So I would say get involved early. Okay. So for example, I started my career at Sprint, now T-Mobile, but in the Sprint world, I wasn't even PR. I had a PR degree, but I started in their event planning team doing corporate hospitality. So we're talking, all the glitz and glamour of Final Fours and Super Bowls and the Sundance Film Festival, and that was wonderful. But then you kind of started getting an influx of the internal meetings, right? We've all been there. We've all probably helped plan them. And there's only so many more rooming lists or menu options or lighting AV technician requirements I wanted to keep doing. And I said, I want to get back to the core of what I love doing, and that's public relations and helping to tell those stories and building those relationships and making something happen. But what helped me in landing my next role with AMC Theaters, which has kind of really boosted the PR trajectory, was even though I was in event planning from the very beginning of my professional career, I immediately got involved with PRSA. All right. And also, to be candid, IABC, which is International Association of Business Communicators. Not all markets have both chapters, but I put both feet in both because I wanted to expand my options, basically, and my network. And so what this does is students, even if you are not in that dream job that you want right now, or perhaps not even the career field that you intend to be on, still being in those professional organizations, A, helps immediately build your professional network so people know who you are. B, it gives you volunteer opportunities in communications to start developing those tactics in that portfolio so they can see what you do. Okay, so I was in event planning. I decided to help do professional development for PRSA. So I get to see every person coming to the door for every event. That's a great way to know a lot of people in your market very quickly. Okay, when you're the check-in person, it's not a sexy job, but as we say in insurance, it's stable, right? So it's stable in that you are greeting and seeing and putting names with faces for every event, okay? And for others, I would do internal communication. So helping to send out the newsletters, okay? So that once I made that shift to full-time communications, yeah, I didn't have a full-time gig in it, but I had relatable examples that I could go back to on how I started to sharpen and keep my comm skills developed. Also, great leadership opportunities, okay? You're on the board of directors, perhaps you become president. Now you're president of a nonprofit organization, basically, okay? Your board may have 5 people, maybe it has 25 people, but now you're leading and you kind of get into more of an organizational crash course, financials, how are dues coming in? Do we have budget to put on events? How do I engage and empower the board or my personal kind of shareholders so that they can kind of come to events? And so you kind of glean a good insight into the operational and financial side of a business almost for free. Because if something does go well, you're not going to get fired for it. You know, you're on a nonprofit volunteer board, but it's a way to kind of get that experience without risking your full-time job or even being VP of finance. Okay. We're in PR. We get the joke. We hate numbers, which is why I went to PR. We get it. But today's day and age, we have to be familiar and comfortable around those numbers, not only to pitch our cause like we saw today, but again, from a financial perspective, the more we can read that or speak that language, I think the more credence we will have at the C-suite table to maintain that seat. Okay. So again, helping to do finances of your local PRSA chapter. It may not sound fun. It may not get you out of the bed in the morning, but for your full-time gig and understanding that financial operations side of the business, that could do you wonders essentially. So get involved early. And again, it helps expand your network. People know who you are. They see what you can do, and you get bonus experience while not risking your full-time job doing it. Great question, Jill.
And Lynn, you have a good comment as well as follow-up for students to get skills for your portfolio. Volunteer for a nonprofit so you can apply your skills and get some real work experience, and you can start building on that. And I can guarantee you they need your help.
Great. Looks like Val has a great question. So Val, hope you don't mind me repeating your question here. So Val works for a public power utility in South Dakota. Just released the first ESG report. That's awesome. And for those of you, CSR was the standard. Now ESG, environmental sustainability governance, is now a new term that's going to come into the fold as well. So some might use interchangeably, but great point, Val. Val's got a great story to tell, but as we all have probably experienced, a limited budget to do it and limited D&I efforts. And so it seems like the story that she's attempted to tell was making a mountain out of a molehill. What are some tips for smaller companies? Okay, so Val, my first question is, what seemed to be the mountain in front of you, perhaps?
And since we are on meeting format, if you want to unmute yourself, you can actually do so.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure if Val's connection's coming through, but so I'll just say, if it does seem like a massive project in front of you that you thought would just be a great initiative to start, again, I would say start small. So you mentioned that you have a limited budget. Okay. So we're not going to be printing out 10,000 copies of our 85-page book. No problem. But that Canva tool that we showed earlier, that's completely free. You can go to that today and start taking small sample sizes of your efforts and making social media posts out of it. Or if the company has an intranet, make that graphic and do a small blurb article. So now you're informing your best brand advocates of your employees. And if others are thinking this is more of a bigger project than you think it is, and that tells me that further education needs to take place to them on helping them realize what the scope actually is. So it almost sounds like they're not getting where you're coming from. And when that happens, it's up to us to take the initiative, right? So I think it's a re-education process, and that's going to help level set with them what you're actually trying to do, and B, tear down that mountain in front of you to make it easier for you, Val, to probably get those stories that you need and help amplify what you are able to do here on that smaller budget. Hopefully that helps a little bit. And again, if not, then connect with me on social. I'm more than happy to take this conversation offline. Gabby has a great question. For all of those who need all the books, love it. You can find all your books at Amazon.com today. What's your number one book you would recommend to PR social comms professionals? That is a great question. Well, in studying for the APR, we had to read The Effective Tools for Public Relations. That's a great bare bones book for it. Look at my bookshelf over here. You know what? One that is not specifically a PR book, but I have it on my shelf right here. Let's see, right here. Okay. You may not see this because I'm sharing my screen. So it says Extreme Ownership. Okay. This is not a specific PR book, but it's by Navy SEAL Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership. And this book and these principles can apply to any profession. But here's that we're in PR. Here's why I loved it. Because I think it's easy in all of our jobs to say, okay, well, this didn't go well, and clearly Bob screwed it up. Okay. Basically, I handed Bob the product in a silver platter, and Bob tripped down the stairs, and the platter went down the stairs, and now it's a disaster. With Extreme Ownership, teaches us, and from the Navy SEAL point of view, is at the end of the day, you have ownership for your whole team. Okay. And perhaps Bob tripped down the steps because I didn't tell him, Bob, you have 5 steps to go down before you get to the landing. Or Bob, I should have known that Bob wasn't great at balancing things. And so I shouldn't have given him the platter to start with. Okay. And you might think, well, that's putting a lot on yourself. And yeah, that's the point. But the fun part is, and the eye-opening part for me was, once you are willing to accept extreme ownership and take that responsibility, then almost eliminates your fear of failure. Because I'm firmly believe that in our companies and for our clients, they're gonna respect you more for saying, it's on me. You know, but here's what I would do different next time. So don't repeat the same mistakes. Extreme ownership applies to you taking ownership of your career, your projects, your team. Okay, so like I said, even though that me and someone else were button heads on that CSR report, and he thought I was just taking over, I took the ownership of saying, okay, I'm going to go to his office and let him talk first. And that's what helped get us to the bottom of the situation and the disagreement, to be quite honest with you. So I took ownership of that situation, even though he was a 16-year veteran of the company and he was a director, and I was there for 6 months, and I was a director as well, but he clearly had a longer tenure than I did. That can be intimidating, but take ownership of that situation and be confident in what you can do. So it's not a PR skills book, but it's a book that I think can apply and help you in all aspects of your profession and in your life. Okay, next up. Leanne wants to know if I can send you some slides, take some of the stats and reformat. Okay, Leanne, we'll connect offline and we can see what we can share. The Edelman stuff is all public information, so no problem with that. And we'll see what the other case study stuff I can share with you. And Karina, yes, Extreme Ownership, 45% off on Amazon today. Thank you. You're doing a great sales job for me on my behalf. Perfect. Again, Extreme Ownership is the title. How U.S. Navy SEALs lead and win, which is wonderful. Looking at another book for you real quick. This is not an Amazon plug, but just books in general to help you. Okay. 2 other things I'm going to tell you right now. One is called Can't Hurt Me. Okay, Can't Hurt Me. This is hard to see. David Goggins is the author. Pretty memorable face on the cover of the book there. Can't Hurt Me is the name of this. You can't see it. If you think we've all had rough lives, read this book. David was minority in central Indiana. You can imagine some of the torment that he received as a young man. He tells you himself, 300 pounds, was a termite exterminator in his life, and was on a downward spiral for health and everything else. And he turned it around. So from a mental fortitude standpoint, this is a great book to kind of steer you in a different direction, again, to apply to different parts. And we're going to have those times where we're butting heads with the CEO, or he or she is not approving our plan, or our teams aren't kind of aligning with us. And when you realize it's up to me to make that change, and when things ultimately won't go well, let it roll off your back and fight another day. That's awesome. Okay. The third book is from former special agent Evie Pompouras. It's called Becoming Bulletproof. Okay. And this is great with working with people. Former CIA, former FBI. Actually, I'm going to put this in the chat. She tells you kind of how to read people and how to respond to people, which in our line of work, we got to do every day, right? So I'm typing the name of the author here. So these are not PR specific books, but these are books that if you read, I think you can apply to more than just PR in your day-to-day function. And I help you just become a stronger leader overall, to help you have stronger conviction about yourself and your skill sets, and then also leading your PR communication teams and clients. Okay. Okay, great questions so far. I think we have technically 8 minutes left. Any other questions or comments or concerns that I can help with today?
I think Janet had one as well. And looking back at it, yes.
Okay, you've heard 2 messages, Janet. One, that people want to see CSR as something more than a marketing ploy, true. And that you should connect to something that doesn't necessarily have something to do with your products or services, okay? But then Gillette's campaign failed partly because people could not see a connection with the product, true. And that we should talk about what we're doing connects with the company. Is that a contradiction? Okay, so is Gillette's company failed probably because people could not see connection, and that we should talk about what we're doing connects with the company. So I see what you're saying. So if I'm interpreting correctly, help solve a societal issue that's not tied to the company, but wait a minute, that's a disconnect, and that's going to turn people, investors off. Okay, so for example, so for Amazon, the first thing that popped in my head when I read your question was, I think when most people think of Amazon, they go on to an online store, they order Prime or whatever it may be, and 2 days or up to 10 days later, a truck shows up, package is on the doorstep. Okay, you may not think about forests or greenery when you're ordering that package. So in Amazon's case, we are making a concerted effort to, again, help restore and sustain with the National Conservancy forests and greenery all across the world. So that's kind of a little bit out of the box of what consumers might think. Well, when I think of Amazon, I don't think the rainforest, perhaps, right? But in our world, you know, it's a total environment effort, so to speak. And again, we're creating our own climate pledge to try to beat the Paris Agreement 10 years early. So I think to your point, Janet, is how can you show that it ties into a broader effort on your part? Gillette failed because I think they hadn't made that connection yet. People are used to razors, and then they're being told how I should act as a man. And not just that, but this is with the feedback that came out during that campaign, it was interpreted as Gillette was equating masculinity with toxicity. Okay, not one-off examples, but just a flat line. If you're a guy, you're toxic. And while that was not maybe their, should not have been their intent, that's how it came across. And not only that, like I said, 0 products were featured or tying on how it kind of relates back. So I think that's part of where the Gillette thing failed, and how companies can succeed is painting the picture of how broadly it ties into their overall effort. So Amazon, as we all know, is all over the world, but how are we mindful of being better for the environment as a whole? So it's the electric vehicles we're buying, right? It's the package reinvention of being more sustainable for the environment. And speaking of the environment, how can we protect the environment in the tree portion of it? Okay. So I think that's a way, if companies are trying to not create that disconnection, you're going to have to build some equity first and then show the broader message that you're trying to do. Because again, 6 years earlier for Gillette, again, they had that contest, campaign, whatever you want to call it, where, you know, kiss your female partner before and after you shave. And, you know, if she hates you if you haven't shaved, then you need a Gillette razor. Well, now you're using a woman as an object and a reward. And then in less than a decade later, like, well, you need to be better, man. Well, you just told me that I'm trying to get the woman, so I need to shave my face. And now you're telling me I need to be better than that. So I think that's where a disconnect can happen. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, about 4 minutes left. You guys have been awesome. First thing on a Monday morning, kudos to you for taking that extreme ownership and first thing on a Monday morning and joining PRSA Midwest Week. It's amazing we have 12 chapters in this region that all do wonderful work. And I think this is a great network to have that all kind of fuel our pain in our region, because I think the coasts probably experience some different things. But I think we have that same type of culture, I think, that usually runs right through the Midwest or the heart of the country here. So any other questions? If not, again, please connect with me on social. I'm more than happy to connect with you and follow you back. And again, us PR pros, we're all in the same boat, right? Sometimes we got to share the same oar so we can row down the river, because we are the stewards of the profession. And if people don't advocate on our behalf and don't help us grow, no one else will. So it's up to us to kind of, again, own that for us and help support each other and keep moving us all forward as a profession. So it's been an absolute privilege, an opportunity to speak with you this morning. And again, let me know how I can ever help you guys in the future.
Thank you so much, Andy. And thank you to everyone for joining. Hope that we see you on the future calls. We will share with you when we get all of the recordings available and how we'll get them out to you if you want them. There's only one recording that's not going to be available, or one speaker who didn't want his session recorded, and that's one of today's. But otherwise, we'll get those out to you. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day and a great week.
Thanks.